I'm going to talk today about the city budgets. I think I'm one of I don't know how many people are excited or happy about what the city budget process is in New York. But after observing city government here for 50 years, I really believe we have arrived at a budget process that is one to be complimented and one to be appreciated. I do think it is the most effective, democratic, accessible, and responsible process there is in this country, more so than the state of New York and the federal government. And the budget is more than just a financial document. We have three budgets in New York City: the capital budget, the expense budget, and a contract budget. But the budget also makes a political statement on what the philosophy of government is in the city, in the state, and the federal government. We have a lot of one-party rule in New York, which may explain why our budget is not as contentious as it is in the other jurisdictions. But we do have a process that lets people be heard and issues be heard. We look at the state government, which also basically has one-party rule in New York State. But the budget process has been a long and arduous one, and rarely is accomplished on time, even though there is one party ruling the state right now. And at the federal government, it's almost like no party rule, and budgets are never passed. And we've been operating on continuing resolutions for years. Even though there is a requirement for the president and for the governor, for each the president and the governor and the mayor to issue a proposed budget on its specified date of the year, we all operate differently on arriving at what the budget is at the end of the time. And in New York City, we have a pretty good process for doing that. And we didn't come about it accidentally, and we didn't come about that process just out of good thought. We came out of that process out of understanding failure, because we failed big time. I don't know that most of you remember, but New York City by 1975 was virtually bankrupt. If not technically bankrupt, we were bankrupt. We had years of a shrinking population and an aging infrastructure, and we had been spending capital money for expense projects, and by 1975 we just basically ran out of money, and nobody was willing to give us any. In fact, the president of the United States said, "I'm not going to bail you out," and there was a famous headline on the front page of the Daily News which said, "Ford to New York City, drop dead." Luckily, we had some people who had some foresight outside of city government who helped us come to a position where we could reestablish our financial base and make the city work better and more efficiently with a more understanding budget. And it started with a governor who really was very forward thinking. It was Hugh Carey. It was in 1975. We had some civic leaders who got together to come up with a method for raising funds for New York City. We had leaders of business and industry and the municipal unions in New York City who really came to the rescue of the city in a big way. And when they formed a corporation called the Municipal Assistance Corporation, to raise money that we couldn't do in the open market. And it was done using our sales tax as collateral. Had to go to the sales tax, had to go to the bonds that the Municipal Assistance Corporation was issuing. But it was an entity which had the backing of all of the civic and business and labor entities in New York City, and it was very successful. And then it was the establishment of charter revision commissions. We've had a charter in the city for since more than 100 years, but it wasn't until charter revision commissions were established first by the governor and the state in 1972, and then by city administrations, that we really started getting a handle on what the budget process should be. And what we have after all of these years is really a very easy to understand process that has worked for us. And the city is probably one of the most stable and financially successful municipal governments in the country. And I think it's the charter, what happened to the charter, what was done by the charter is really what brought that about. Because in 1975, we laid off thousands of municipal employees. We laid off firemen, policemen, teachers, class size ballooned to 35 or more in each class in the city. Subways weren't fixed. Graffiti was an absolutely horrendous problem. Streets weren't fixed. We really were under a siege of failure. And yet in a shorter period of time, a decade or so, we were able to rebound because of what was presented in our charter. And I think that that's something that we should thank everybody for, and we live with it today. Basically, we live with the same provisions that were passed in the 70s and early 80s to improve the charter. So the charter, it started in 1975. It was the first time the charter actually required the city to use generally approved accounting practices. There wasn't anything in the charter prior to that said we had to do that. Subsequent charter revisions requirements that city agencies develop plans and annually update the plans for maintaining the city's infrastructure and major capital assets. We changed contracting procedures, expanded disclosure of financial information, created mechanisms designed to reduce the likelihood of corruption in government, and create an independent budget office. I want to stop on that for a while because the IBO is particularly interesting. It was part of the revisions proposed by the Charter Commission and approved by the voters in 1989. However, it didn't become as part of city government until 1996 because most of the city elected officials thought it threatened their authority over the budget. But good government sued in 1996 and we forced the implementation of the IBO. I'm told it's now a relied upon and respected partner in the budget process. And I think that's, one of the ways we've improved the budget. And one of the most recent additions to the budget process is the rainy day fund. Up until now, the city's budget had balanced and we never had an opportunity to put money aside in case we had a downturn. And now we have a process to do that. So that's a further recent enhancement of the budget process in New York City. And one thing that I think I had to point to one part of the process that I think really improved it. It's the budget calendar. And the budget calendar, or if we could see the budget calendar, it would be great. It's in the book, and I think I think something you want to copy and just keep because it really is the underpinning of how the budget is developed in New York and the opportunities, and there are many opportunities to participate. The budget calendar, it hasn't really changed since it was put in place in the late 1970s, 1980s. It's the same calendar, but what it does is it provides an opportunity at each level of the process for public information to come out on what the budget process is, to see various entities of the process, and to give an opportunity for community boards, for individual citizens, for agencies, for the city council, all to participate, and it sets up a series of dates that things have to happen. Basically, as far as I can find out, it's really happened this way. And the best part of the deal is that at the end, we come up with a budget which is supposed to go into effect on July 1st, but if it doesn't go into effect on July 1st, the preceding year's budget continues. So there's no fear of shutdowns of government agencies. We don't stop the calendar and say it's till the end of the month. We just go on. The money for the capital expenses is reallocated until the council is able to, the council and the mayor are able to agree, the council is able to approve a budget. So this is a good process. It's a process that has enabled us to have a city which is functioning well. We may have political differences and political issues, programs and policy, but it's a consistent program that allows us to develop a budget through the year, allows people to understand what's the budget, has reporting requirements at every stage, involves involves the controller, the community boards, the public agencies, and I think what we end up with is something we can be very pleased with from a process standpoint, a representative standpoint. Happy to discuss it further if anybody has questions.
How often, because I can't remember the last time the budget wasn't totally settled by July 1st.
There have been days, there have been like 4 or 5 days, but really nothing happens, so it's not that a crisis occurs. Nothing stops as it does in the state. So there have been occasions when they just haven't been able to agree. The mayor does not vote on the budget. The mayor can veto additions that he doesn't like. And then the council can override a veto by 2/3. But the process usually there is usually an agreement that it comes before deadline. There have been occasions when it's gone into July. They have been so insignificant because everything keeps going that I can't tell you how many, but it has happened.
Anybody else has any other questions? Hold on. Chat. There is a question: at what point would the state step in if the city wasn't able to pass the budget? Is that something that the state has any regulatory oversight for?
I don't believe so. I mean, because the city will have a budget, because it's a budget that is proposed and voted on in June. If they don't agree, then the prior year's budget stays in effect. So I don't think there's a point where the city will not have a budget if it doesn't pass the budget. And what happens in the state is I think legislators don't get paid. I worked in Albany at one point where we didn't get paid. I didn't get paid for a month. I think that's been correct. Government employees get paid the budget. There is no budget in the state, and in the federal government, they're also, if they don't pass the budgetary requirements, then the government is shut down, which it has done. But since under this charter, we always have a budget, so the state would not be stepping in because we always have a budget. Because last year's budget just goes into effect and continues until the new budget is approved. Now, if we ran out, I mean, I'm sure there are instances that we're going to do something that the state doesn't like, but I think that it would be the program that the state would step in, not the budget, because the budget will just continue.